We will now turn to our first and only witness, Mr. Neil Borowski. It is long-standing policy that we swear all of our witnesses in. Will you please stand and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Let the record reflect that the witness answered in the affirmative. Is the Special Inspector General for the Troubled Asset Relief Program, TARP. Prior to assuming this position on December 15, 2008, Mr. Borowski was a federal prosecutor in the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York for more than 8 years. In that office, Mr. Borowski was a senior trial counsel and headed the mortgage fraud group, which investigated and prosecuted cases of mortgage fraud, and also cases of securities fraud with respect to collateralized debt obligations. Notably, Mr. Borowski led the broad investigation into the $55 trillion credit default swap market and is a recipient of the Attorney General's John Marshall Award for his work. We welcome you, Mr. Borowski. You allowed as much time as you may consume. We generally give people 5 minutes. We thought about giving you 10 minutes. But then I thought about the importance of it, and I said as much time as you may consume, but try to stay within 10 minutes.
I will, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Issa, it is members of the committee. It is an honor and privilege to appear before you today and present to you our quarterly report to Congress. In my testimony, I'd like to outline what is contained in our quarterly report, section by section, going over some of the highlights. In Section 2 of our report, we do as we do in each of our quarterly reports to summarize what has happened in the last 3 months in the TARP. And this has been a busy quarter for the TARP. We've seen the expansion of several programs, the bankruptcy of General Motors and Chrysler and the extraordinary government support of those industries, the expansion of the mortgage modification program with the selection of servicers and the allocation of approximately $18 billion in support of that program. We've seen paybacks of TARP money, more than $70 billion for capital purchase program recipients, and the launch of the public-private investment program with the selection of 9 asset managers and the commitment to provide up to $30 billion of taxpayer funds to fund that program. And that's all laid out in Section 2. In Section 3, we've attempted to put the TARP program in context. Originally started as a $700 billion program to purchase toxic assets from financial institutions, the TARP has expanded to 12 separate programs involving up to $3 trillion. But it doesn't stand alone in the support of the financial system from the Federal Government. Since 2007, more than 50 different programs from different agencies have been announced, instituted, and implemented. And a lot of what we've seen when hearing about TARP recipients and their participation is that it's not alone. A bank may have an investment from the TARP, but also participate or issue debt with an FDIC guarantee or borrow money from the Federal Reserve. And there are so many numbers flying around that we thought, to further the goal of transparency, we wanted to put the TARP in the necessary context of these other programs. And that's what we've done in Section 3. And for each of the 50 programs, we put out 3 different numbers. 1, the amount of money that is currently outstanding on each of those programs, which is about $3 trillion. 2, the high water mark from their inception until January 30th, 2009, which is about $4.7 trillion. And the third number, which is what the total exposure, if each of these programs were fully subscribed to, each of the insurance contracts were used, all of the different programs were, and all the support in total, and that number totals $23.7 trillion. Now, since we've issued this report, there's been some harsh criticism coming from Treasury. I've seen some public statements that attack the numbers in our report as being inflated. One press comment said that a Treasury spokesman described them as ridiculous. We take offense with that. I think that if you look at the report and in context, it's very clear where these numbers came from. They came from the government itself. These are all open source, public source information. This is from the websites of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, submissions to Congress. If the numbers are inflated, then it was the government itself that inflated them, not us. Secondly, as far as the suggestion that we are trying to shock and awe with this number, again, I think that we've made very clear in this report in black and white what this number means. We explain that this number involves programs that, yes, have terminated. We explain that that some of these numbers are collateralized, that there is collateral. All of that is set forth in black and white. But one thing that is very clear, the number is basically just the accumulation of what these 50 separate programs are and what the total amount of financial support that the government has committed to. Frankly, what this attack is a challenge to the basic transparency that we try to provide in this report so that members of Congress and members of the public understand in total what is going on as part of the government's support of the financial system in this crisis. And that brings us to our next section, Section 5 of the report, where we talk about our recommendations. And one of our primary recommendations brings us to the same issue of transparency. We've now been in existence for 7 months, my office, and over the 7 months we've been pushing, really from my 8th day in my office when I made the first recommendation, to push for greater and greater transparency. That recommendation is one that we continue to make today, which is Treasury requiring TARP recipients to report on how they're using the money. Treasury has repeatedly refused to adopt this recommendation, and as a result, in February, we sent out letters to each and every financial institution to ask them directly to report to us to prove that that they can provide meaningful information, that there is a purpose to requiring banks to account for their use of funds. Yesterday, we issued that audit result, and the evidence is as we suspected. Contrary to Treasury suggestions, banks can and should be required to report on how they're using funds. Banks reported a variety of different uses, aside from just lending, as the Chairman noted, to acquire other financial institutions, to make investments in mortgage-backed securities, to pay down debt, all different forms of use of funds that can and should be verified and can be part of the basic transparency of the TARP program. As we noted in our recommendations, this is not the only recommendation regarding transparency that has not been adopted. We set 4 different recommendations, including those related to basic concepts, so taxpayers can know what the value of the assets that they are the chief investors for. Treasury receives monthly reports on those valuation estimates, but will not share them with the public. And we too think that too is a failure of transparency. Similarly, we have recommendations related to the TALF program and the public-private investment program, basic concept of transparency. So 1, the taxpayers can know what's going on with their investments, and 2, the watchful eyes, as has been famously quoted, sunshine is the best disinfectant, and it will discourage and deter bad behavior. In Section 1 of our report, we talk about what we've been doing for the past 3 months, building our audit and investigations divisions. We're concluding 6 audits this quarter. We've announced or about to announce 5 separate audits. We talk about that. Our investigations division is continuing. We have 35 open criminal investigations, and we will continue to strive forward with bringing greater transparency to this program. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Issa, it is again a privilege to be here today to present this report, which we believe is an essential part of continued transparency. We've had more than 12 million hits to our website since we've started, with almost 700,000 downloads of our previous reports. And I think that we act in deed as in word to bring this necessary transparency. And I thank you for your indulgence on time, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your being here.